I can still hear it, the sharp crack of laughter cutting through the room like a knife. My own son leaning back in his chair, smirk plastered across his face as he spat the words that pierced deeper than any wound. "Call an Uber, old man." My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from holding back the storm rising inside me. They thought I was broken, finished, nothing more than a burden they could mock. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that the very company they tossed in my face, the name they used to humiliate me, belonged to me. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to shout. My silence had been building something far stronger than their arrogance. And when the truth came crashing down a week later, it wasn't me who sat in shame. It was them. Hello, my dear friends. My name is Harold, and I'm just an old man with a story on his heart. If you're here with me today, thank you. It means more than you might think. You see, age has a way of making people look right through you, as if you've already disappeared. But I know I'm not the only one who's felt that sting. Tell me in the comments, has anyone ever dismissed you just because of your age, or made you feel like you didn't matter anymore? I'd like to know your story too, because it helps me feel less alone. Now, let me take you back to the moment when I realized my children no longer saw me as their father, but as an inconvenience. That was the day something inside me broke, and something else quietly awakened. From the outside, my family looked like a picture worth framing. 2 grown children, both educated, both with jobs in the city. A son with a sharp suit and sharper tongue, and a daughter who never missed a chance to remind others how busy and important she was. To neighbors, we looked like success. Polite smiles at barbecues, cheerful waves from the driveway, all the little performances families put on. But what people didn't see was the distance. My wife, God rest her soul, used to hold us together. She had the warmth, the patience, the love that softened their edges. Since she passed, the house grew colder, the visits shorter, the laughter more hollow. My son stopped calling me dad and started calling me old man, half in jest, half in truth. My daughter began treating me like a fragile vase tucked in the corner, something to avoid touching. The in-laws, well, they were no better. Smiles in public, but whispers behind my back about how I was too set in my ways, too slow, too stubborn. And the neighbors? They only saw glimpses. They saw me shuffle past with my cane, nodding politely, pretending I still had a place in a world that had quietly pushed me aside. To everyone else, we were still a family. To me, I was beginning to feel like a guest in my own bloodline. My son, Daniel, is a man of numbers. Cold, precise, everything in his life measured by what it can earn him. He walks into a room like he owns it, but can't find it in himself to hold a door open for his own father. My daughter Claire is different, but in ways that cut just as deep. She hides behind her busyness, always checking her phone, always rushing off. When she looks at me, it's not with warmth of step, but with the polite indifference you'd give a stranger asking for directions. And then there are the in-laws. They smile in public, shake my hand a little too firmly, and talk about modern ways, as if my lifetime of work and wisdom were relics best left in a museum. Behind closed doors, I've heard their whispers. He's slowing them down. He's holding them back. But what they don't know, what they've never bothered to ask, is what it took to give them the life they now enjoy. I still remember the nights working double shifts, my hands blistered from construction by day, my eyes burning from driving a cab at night. The hours I traded, the meals I skipped, so they could have more than I ever did. There's one object I hold on to from those days, a simple brass key. It once opened the tiny house I bought with every ounce of sweat I had. That house sheltered them, kept them warm, gave them a safe place to dream. Every time I touch that key, I remember the man I was. The man who carried them on his shoulders so their feet never had to touch the cold ground. And now, the ones I carried laugh at the thought of carrying me. It started small. I only asked Daniel if he could give me a ride to the store. My knees had been burning that day, and the walk felt longer than usual. I thought he'd understand, maybe even be glad to help. But he didn't even look up from his phone. He chuckled and said, "Dad, you're not crippled. Stop being dramatic. Call an Uber." The words hung in the air, louder than they should have been. Claire laughed too, a quick, sharp sound that cut straight through me. "Yeah, Dad, it's the 21st century. Stop acting like you're helpless." I forced a smile, pretended their words didn't sting. But inside, I felt something shatter. I swallowed it down. That's what you do when you're a father. You take the blows in silence because showing the hurt only gives them more power. But I remembered every syllable, every smirk, every careless laugh. Those words branded themselves into me, and I knew one day they'd see the weight of what they'd said. The first sting didn't end there. Once they tasted my silence, they began to push further, testing how much I would endure. One night at dinner, Daniel made a show of ordering the most expensive bottle of wine, then leaned across the table and said loudly, "Don't worry, Dad, this isn't coming out of your pension. We'll cover it." The table laughed. My cheeks burned, not from the wine, but from the humiliation of being spoken to like a beggar in front of my own grandchildren. Another time, Claire dropped by the house and saw me polishing the old brass key I keep in my pocket. She rolled her eyes. "Still holding on to that dusty place? You should sell it before you die, Dad. No one wants an old house that smells like mothballs." She didn't know that house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the proof of every hour I worked, every sacrifice I made so they could have better. But to her, it was just an inconvenience, something standing in the way of her next upgrade. Then there was the time I asked Daniel if he could help with the yard, just trimming some hedges that had grown wild. He smirked, patted my shoulder like I was some confused child, and said, "Dad, hire someone, or better yet, let the place go. It's not like you'll be around long enough to care about curb appeal." I sat in my chair that night, staring at the yard through the window. The hedges seemed to mock me too, growing taller, out of control, just like the disrespect my children had learned to feed on. And when I trusted them with small things, Claire handling a bill that arrived in the mail, Daniel promising to pick up medicine, they always forgot. Always had an excuse. I was busy. It slipped my mind. "You should have set up auto-pay, Dad." They didn't just fail me. They made me feel invisible. Each word, each laugh, each dismissal pressed down heavier than my weak legs ever could. But I said nothing. Not because I was weak, because I was waiting. And deep inside, I carried a secret so sharp it could split their pride in half. A truth I knew would cut deeper than any insult they had thrown my way. I didn't need to fight back. I didn't need to shout. All I had to do was wait for the moment when silence would speak louder than their laughter. It wasn't just the insults anymore. It was the little things, the shadows in the corners, the whispers that stopped when I walked into a room. One evening, I caught Daniel in my study. He was rifling through my desk drawer, where I keep old letters and papers. When he saw me, he slammed it shut and forced a smile. "Just looking for a pen, Dad." But I noticed the corner of an envelope sticking out, the one that held some of my investment documents. Another time, Claire was on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was near. Her voice was sharp, impatient. "Yes, once we get the house in our name, we'll renovate." "No, he won't last forever." I stood frozen, my hand gripping the wall for balance. She hung up the second she realized I was there, brushing past me with a quick kiss on the cheek as if I hadn't heard the knife in her words. And then came the bank statement. I keep a small account, separate from everything else, just for my daily expenses. One month, I noticed withdrawals I hadn't made. Nothing too large, nothing obvious, but enough to sting. When I asked Daniel about it, he shrugged. "Probably the bank's mistake. Don't worry about it, Dad. I'll handle it." But the unease grew heavier. There was also the will. My late wife and I had written it years ago, kept safely in a locked drawer. One night, I found the lock broken, the papers disturbed. No one admitted to touching it. But the way my children avoided my eyes told me the truth. That was when I knew. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were already circling, already planning what they would take. They thought I was too weak, too blind, too old to notice. But what they didn't realize was that I had proof. Proof that my silence had teeth. Proof that when the right moment came, their whispers would become their undoing. The whispers kept gnawing at me. The missing money, the broken lock on my desk, Claire's phone call. I knew something was off. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. And one night, proof found me. I was sitting in the living room when I heard voices drifting in from the porch. Daniel and Claire thought I was asleep. "If we can convince him to sign over the property, The house is ours. Daniel whispered. Don't rush it, Claire hissed back. He's stubborn. But the moment he slips, we're ready. The will won't matter once the papers are changed. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I let their words slice through me, each one colder than the last. They weren't just waiting for me to fade away. They were plotting to strip me of everything while I still breathed. Later that week, when Daniel wasn't careful, I found a folder left on the kitchen counter. Inside were drafts of legal forms, transfer documents with my name already printed, just waiting for a shaky signature. I didn't confront them. I didn't shout. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm, carrying it back to my study. That night, I slid it into the same drawer where I kept the old investment papers, the ones they never knew existed. My silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. They thought they were circling prey, but in truth, they were walking into a trap of their own making. And I would let them laugh, let them whisper, let them believe I was powerless. Until the moment came when the floor would fall out from under them. Let me stop here for a moment, my friends. If you were in my shoes, an old man overhearing his own children plotting, finding papers with his name already stolen, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them right then, slammed the folder on the table, and demanded answers? Or would you have done what I did, stayed silent, and let their arrogance dig the hole deeper? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Because sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon a man can carry. It all came to a head at a Sunday dinner. My daughter insisted we meet at her house. She said it was easier for everyone. Easier for them, maybe. For me, it was another reminder that my own table sat empty now. The meal was loud with their chatter, filled with talk about promotions, investments, new cars, and vacations I was never invited on. I sat quietly at the end of the table, cutting my food slower than the rest. Then Daniel raised his glass. To the future, he said, smiling at his sister. To new beginnings, once Dad finally decides to stop clinging to the past. The room erupted with laughter. Claire leaned in and added, "We're looking into options, Dad. Selling the house, moving you into somewhere more manageable." Her husband smirked across the table. Maybe a home where someone can actually watch him before he signs something he doesn't even understand. Their words weren't just disrespect. They were an ambush. I looked at them, one by one, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. The grandchildren stared down at their plates, silent, too young to know what loyalty means. Inside me, the heat rose. My heart pounded. Every insult I had swallowed, every laugh I had endured, every betrayal I had kept hidden, it all pressed against my chest like a dam ready to burst. And yet, I stayed silent. I sipped my water and let them believe I was cornered, beaten, powerless. But my silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Because even as they mocked me, I knew what they didn't. I knew that within days their pride would collapse in front of strangers, that the very company they leaned on for security was mine. I left the table early that night, cane in hand, each step heavier than the last. And as the door closed behind me, I whispered under my breath, "Enjoy this laughter while you can. It won't last long." A few days after that dinner, Daniel came storming into my house without knocking. Papers in hand, he slammed them on the table. "Dad, it's time. Sign this. Stop being stubborn." It was the transfer form, the same one I'd seen before, the one with my name already filled in like I was just a ghost to be erased. Claire followed him inside, her voice sharp. "We're trying to help you. Don't you want things to be easier? Don't you want peace of mind?" Peace of mind. Funny choice of words, when their peace meant stripping me of mine. I didn't raise my voice. I reached slowly into my drawer and pulled out an envelope. The edges were worn, the paper yellowed with time. Their eyes lit up, expecting it to be the deed, the will, maybe the papers they wanted me to hand over. I laid it gently on the table. "You're not the only ones who keep papers," I said. My voice was steady, calm. Daniel snatched it open, his confidence cracking as his eyes scanned the words. Claire leaned over his shoulder, her face draining of color. It wasn't the will. It wasn't the deed. It was a letter from years ago, an investment confirmation from a small startup. The name stamped across the top was familiar to them, too familiar. Uber. Daniel's hand trembled as he shoved the paper back into the envelope. This doesn't mean anything," he muttered, but his voice was thinner, weaker. Claire tried to laugh it off. but the sound was brittle, breaking before it left her lips. I leaned forward, meeting their eyes. Not everything I own sits in this house. Not every decision I've made was yours to control. Remember that. For the first time, they didn't laugh. They didn't mock. They sat in silence, rattled, confused, unsure of what I truly held. But I said nothing more. I tucked the envelope back into the drawer, closed it gently, and stood with my cane. You should go, I told them, my voice quiet but heavy. They left without another word. And for the first time in years, it wasn't me who felt small. It was them. The silence in my house didn't last long. Pride never dies quietly. It claws and scratches until it finds a new way to attack. A week later, Daniel called me, his voice sharp with irritation. Dad, you can't play games with us. We need those papers. If you care about your family, you'll sign them. Otherwise, don't expect us to keep helping you. Helping me. That was the word he chose. As if neglect, laughter, and betrayal were acts of kindness. But fate has a way of writing its own stories. That very week, their company, my company, scheduled a shareholders meeting. Both of my children were required to attend. They thought it was routine, nothing more than another chance to flaunt their importance. I arrived late, cane in hand, my steps slow but deliberate. The room fell quiet as I entered. Some of the executives knew me already. My children, sitting near the front, froze in their seats. Daniel's jaw tightened. Claire's hands clenched on her lap. The meeting began with the announcement of updated ownership documents. Papers were handed out, and there, in bold black letters, was my name. Primary shareholder, majority owner, the man who had the final say. The same old man they told to call an Uber. Claire's voice cracked first. This can't be right. He doesn't even understand these things. But the lawyer cut her off, pointing directly at the notarized documents. It's all in order, legally binding, every signature accounted for. And then I dropped the final ace. From my pocket, I pulled a small device, a recorder. I pressed play. Their voices filled the boardroom, clear, sharp, inescapable. Daniel, if we can convince him to sign over the property, the house is ours. Claire, he won't last forever. Once he slips, we'll be ready. The room turned on them. Gasps, whispers, cold stares from their colleagues. Every ounce of their carefully crafted respect at work crumbled in seconds. Daniel's face drained of color. Claire buried her head in her hands. They weren't just children mocking an old man anymore. They were exposed liars, manipulators, stripped bare in front of everyone who mattered to them. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to curse. I simply stood there, steadying myself with my cane, and said, "Respect is not a favor, it's a debt, and you failed to pay it." Their own greed had destroyed them. Their own arrogance had led them straight into the trap they never saw coming. And for the first time in years, it was me who walked out taller, leaving them to sit in the silence they once forced upon me. The room fell into a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. My children's faces pale as paper, their mouths open but no words escaping. And in that pause, long, suffocating, unforgettable, the truth settled over them like a judgment that needed no shouting, no anger, only the weight of proof and the quiet authority of a father who had endured their mockery, their betrayal, their greed, and now stood before them not as a burden, but as the very man who held their futures in his hands, restoring order with nothing more than the truth they had tried so hard to bury. I learned something in all of this, something I wish I had understood when I was younger. Respect is not measured in money, nor in titles, nor in the size of a house or the cars in a driveway. Respect is the quiet currency of love, the one thing you cannot fake, cannot steal, cannot demand. My children thought they could take shortcuts, that they could push aside loyalty, that they could treat me like an old coat to be hung up and forgotten. But life has a way of correcting disrespect, of reminding us that patience and truth always rise to the surface. If you are listening to me now, take this with you. Never mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is the strongest answer of all, because silence carries patience, and patience carries justice. And above all, remember this. Family is not the people who share your blood. Family is the people who share your respect. Thank you, my dear friends, for walking with me through this story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, and I'll admit, it wasn't easy to tell. But having you here, listening, reflecting, maybe even seeing a piece of your own life in mine, makes the weight feel lighter. I have shared my pain with you, but I have also shared my strength. And I believe stories like these aren't just about me. They're about all of us, about the lessons we carry and the respect we deserve, no matter our age. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, if your own children or family turned their backs when you needed them most, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have confronted them? Tell me in the comments. I read them all, and they remind me that none of us are truly alone. If this story touched you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that truth has power, and that even in the face of betrayal, dignity is never lost. And if you want more stories like this, more confessions from a heart that has lived long enough to see both the worst and the best in people, stay with me here. You'll always find a seat at my table. Until next time, remember this: stay strong, stay wise, stay blessed.